Hey everybody, this is Jean Bliss. We are having a great conversation today with Ben Steele, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Customer Officer at REI. What you're going to learn is his career trajectory from agency work to running advertising and marketing at REI to his new role as Chief Customer Officer at REI, and the interesting journey that a company that is already customer focused and reaped in their courage and their ability to do things differently needs to continue to move forward and grow and unite that organization to build culture on an ongoing basis. I think you'll really enjoy this show. It was a real joy to do. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Chief Customer Officer Human Duct Tape Show. I am so happy that Ben Steele is with me today. Hey Ben, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm good. I want to tell everybody who you are. You're the Executive Vice President and Chief Customer Officer at REI, one of the brands I admire so much. You're in my latest book as well. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. I really think people are going to get a kick out of your journey and the work that you're doing, not only because of your tenure at REI, but because of the work that you did and your experience to getting you to this role. So take us as far back as you want to take us. I call this the breadcrumbs of the story of your life, because, you know, it's interesting to see where you had those skills that were really inside of you to make you successful at this. So it's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Well, you know, my career started in the advertising world, starting in advertising agencies. And it's sort of an absurd beginning point, but I, in high school, took some sort of, career guidance assessment. And they basically said, you should be a politician or an advertising person. And I thought, well, the only thing missing in terms of people not liking it was lawyers. So I thought, well, okay. And I actually grew up in Boise, Idaho, and I managed to talk my way into an internship at an agency there in town. And writing was a thing that I loved.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I understood the ability to kind of be a writer and a storyteller in a commercial context and, take on a different set of challenges and learn different businesses, and it really intrigued me. And I think in some part being Boise, Idaho, and also because the writer at that agency left almost instantly after my internship began, and I think those were unrelated. I'm confident those were unrelated.
We're gonna take your word for it.
I went from an intern to a working copywriter within a matter of weeks, and
Wow.
was wildly underqualified, but was kind of just thrown into the fire and realized, okay, I've got to understand the target, which is about customer empathy, and I've got to think about emotional connection, which
Right.
is about brand purpose, and I've got to tell compelling stories. And I worked all the way through college, summers and winter breaks, and then freelancing on the side at different agencies. And then as I got out of college, joined a brand new startup agency here in Seattle, where I went to school. And one of my very first clients, coincidentally enough, was REI, and
there you go.
began a relationship with those guys. So spent a lot of years in Seattle and then Los Angeles working at agencies, had my own freelance business for about 7 years, working with agencies and working directly with clients. And I was leading a brand agency here in Seattle called
Mm-hmm.
Hornell Anderson. And one of our clients, again, was REI. And they had just hired a new CEO, Jerry Stritsky. And my clients at REI introduced me to Jerry as he was looking for a new marketing leader, not because I was a candidate, but because
Mm-hmm.
I had a perspective on different leaders given the global brands we worked with. And he and I very quickly connected, sharing a lot of beliefs both about the power of brand and the immense potential of the incredible business that was the REI Co-op. And it went from hey, maybe I'm going to cultivate a new client, to holy cow, maybe I'm going to go on a completely different journey and take a different path than I'd ever taken. And I joined the co-op 4 years ago as their first chief creative officer.
Mm-hmm.
And about 4 or 5 months ago, transitioned to chief customer officer. So, and I've been, delighted at every step of the way. It's an incredible company. And I think the journey we've been on and the space that you and I are going to talk about are pretty closely related. So
yeah. Well, so first of all, thank you for the background and you're being thrown into the deep end of the pool as a copywriter. I had the same experience at Land's End. We were a small company in 1983, and we were all doing everything. And I was writing copy for the catalog, and my copy initially was all this jargony words and stuff. And Gary Comer, the founder, said to me, "Jean, write like you talk."
Right.
Full stop.
Right.
Right.
Great advice.
Yeah, but I think that what happened for you is very cool, because it sounds like you found a home.
Yeah.
At REI, you walk into some of these environments, and it just clicks in your brain and emotionally. Walk me through Chief Creative Officer for the first time 4 years ago. How was the company operating around creative before then? Because I think this is interesting for these kinds of companies as they grow up.
Yeah, I think, I'm at pains to say and want to say it all the time. REI is an 80-year-old company. A lot of people made a lot of really smart decisions before any of us got here, myself in particular. And so I won't pretend for a minute that the company didn't understand brand. I look at, some of our flagship stores. I look at some of the work that we've done, and we clearly were there. That said, I think we were showing up like more of a mass marketer than a real, powerful brand. And I think we had, I guess the best example I'd use is we had catalogs that had models in new clothes in the outdoors. And if you spend any time in the outdoors, turns out that's not really what it feels like. And I think there were sort of two things. There was the aesthetic of, do we look authentic and real? Do we look like the people? Do we look like the people that we are?
Yeah.
And the other piece of it was, hey, we're this different kind of company. And if we're a co-op and we've got members and we don't have shareholders, and are we demonstrating the differentiation of the brand? So, my remit coming in was to champion the power of brand, to do it at the senior leadership level, to make brand as primary a decision-making access for us as operations or as supply chain or as, retail.
So create that lens, right? Create that lens.
Create that lens.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And to, evangelize that importance, and then start championing ideas to demonstrate it. And boy, the thing, I've been a member of REI since the moment they opened in my hometown. I've had, as I said before, multiple, fortunately, multiple moments of being able to work for and with it. And I deeply love the co-op. The beauty of REI as a creative person is there's a lot of brands you work on where you kind of have to make up the story. You got to kind of find what's special here. And you can do that in a powerful way. But at the co-op, you had this 80-year-old passion-based business, member community of 17 million people. It's like you just turned over a rock and there was gold there. So the question wasn't, what's the story? The question was, what's the story that we're going to tell? And that's about as exciting a creative opportunity as you can step into.
So you've been in that role for 4 years, and now transitioning, or you're adding on chief customer officers. It's cumulative, right? So walk us through why now and why that role.
So the creative role originally was kind of a role without a team, which was kind of great. It was sort of you just get to be a free radical and have a lot of opinions about stuff. And that's pretty awesome.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Here's what we should do. As over the 4 years, my team composition has kind of grown and changed. And today, before making the shift to chief creative or chief customer officer, I had the marketing organization, both creative and Marcom, what we call our brand stewardship and impact organization, which is public affairs, government affairs, sustainability, and our giving, our philanthropic arm, which is a huge part of our business. And then customer insights. And as we looked at kind of how customer experience spanned across those different parts of the business, and we hired our first chief digital officer, who Curtis Kopp, we made the decision to bring that organization into kind of my world and my team. And in doing so, felt like, boy, creative doesn't feel like as descriptive or as clarifying as we want it to be. And if creative was about sending a signal to the organization, well, okay, what signal do we want to send to the organization today? And what convening idea do we want to unite these teams? And the answer was pretty easy to get to, right? Customer became the axis that we wanted to unite, starting with insights and analytics, moving to points of incidence and contact with brand as, yes, the differentiating lens, but with a bigger set of ideas attached to who these people are and what they care about.
Well,
that was a long answer. Sorry.
No, I'm a geek for all this stuff. So I love the answer because we call this the Chief Customer Officer Human Duct Tape Show, because what you're doing is creating comprehensiveness for the organization, for the customer experience, or whatever you would say. So walk me through how you brought people along on this idea, because there were probably people that were now blended into this work that may have been doing things on their own or whatever. How did you unite the organization around the work?
One of the things that's truly remarkable about REI is, a lot of businesses and brands talk about purpose and being purpose-based. And I think, we have that in our DNA from day one. And so there is less needing to take people along than I've experienced at other points in my career. And the reason why is, if the key idea is, we believe a life outdoors is a life well lived. Okay, well, what does that mean? That means that we're going to fight for access to the outdoors, and we're going to fight against the things that stand in your way. So, okay, brand was an interesting way to think about that because it was about emotional connection. Now we're going to think about customer and understanding not only what does their life look like relative to how they interact with the co-op today across all of our services and offerings, but we also need to understand who they are in a more fundamental way. And part of the reason there is the way people are interacting with, colliding with, discovering the outdoors is fundamentally different today than it was even 10 years ago.
Tell us more about
generation. That. Yeah, if you sort of said REI's traditional customer in the past was somebody who looked a lot like me, frankly, had a Pacific Northwestern guy with a beard. My path to the outdoors was probably pretty similar to most of our customers, where I grew up in a place that had easy access to the outdoors, discovered it through friends and family, built a relationship, and then continued that. And REI was the only best, greatest option for the lifestyle I wanted to live. Well, flash forward, and you may have well noticed that retail is a different space than it was 10 years ago, and there are some key reasons why. But you think about urbanization, you think about the role of technology, you think about the most diverse population and generation ever in millennials. There are a lot of things keeping them out of the outdoors, and their path to the outdoors is very, very different. So if we don't understand what problem we're solving for them, just opening another store with the same stuff and the same perspective isn't going to solve a problem for them, and fundamentally isn't going to build our membership in the same ways it has in the past. Sure. So we really recognize we've got to understand who they are, and we really have to focus on what is. I mean, look, this is not the first time this has ever been said on your podcast. We really have to understand what problem are we solving for them, not what problem are we solving for the
us.
Co-op. What problem are we solving for a 24-year-old person living in New York City who didn't grow up around the outdoors,
whose face is in a phone, right?
Lives in a tiny apartment, and they don't have room for a boat and a tent and a bike and a this. What is the outdoors to her? What is the role of REI to her? And how do we build the love and then help enable the access that start to build that relationship? Because our business aside, time in the outdoors is a fundamental part of a healthy lifestyle. And health, and doctors are now writing prescriptions for time outdoors in recognizing that something is lost when people don't have it. So if this is a human right, if this is a fundamental part of what life well lived, if we're not serving it, we're not doing our business any good, but we're also not doing our purpose any good.
Well, and I think that's such a critical thing, which is the clarity of your purpose lets you be really deliberate about what you will and will not do to grow. So walk us through, as you were thinking through this and you're building this, of course, what were some deliberate choices that you're making, and how did you bring your company along in those things?
So one of the first things we did in relatively early days was to change our logo back to a logo from the past, which sounds like a pretty superficial thing, but we had lost the word co-op. We'd lost the construction co-op at some point along the way. And we felt like, I felt like it was extraordinarily important that we said that we were a co-op, and in many ways that we reminded ourselves that we were a co-op, because it means that we serve the member, because it means that we, even to your point around growth, we don't have a shareholder base saying growth is the goal. We have a customer base and a member base saying enabling life outdoors is the goal, right? So those are different things. So we put co-op back into the logo, and in doing so, had a galvanizing moment with our employee base, had a galvanizing moment with the people who knew us and felt like we'd lost our way a little bit, and had a story platform for telling the story of a different kind of company. We then, in relatively short order, did this thing called Opt Outside, which was to close our stores on Black Friday. And boy, there wasn't a better demonstration of what makes us a different kind of company and what is our purpose as a retailer. Turns out it's not to sell you the most possible stuff. It actually is about giving you time in the outdoors. And we didn't think there was a more powerful way to make that point than by closing our doors on the busiest shopping day of the year. So those two things, in relatively close coincidence, and a couple of other, little moves that we made. At one point, we put, for the first time in the company's history, something other than product on the homepage. We had a moment where folks could choose where a donation. We said we're going to put $500,000 into 10 key outdoor places. You tell us where. And we had people saying, "Boy, the business is going to go under. We can't. The site's not going to sell anything." And the opposite happened. We thought it was going to take us 30 days to give away all those dollars based on the metrics that said how many people would click. It took 32 hours. And those things said, okay, we have permission to do some different stuff. We have permission to have a different conversation. And I think they gave the organization confidence to say, well, let's go do something big like Opt Outside.
Yeah. Well, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's paradoxical. What you did is the inverse of what people usually think to do to grow. And, I've been using this word bravery lately, because it's gutsy and it is brave. So is that the path that you're really on now, is taking a series of brave steps to prove and operationalize to your purpose? Tell us other things you're doing as you're leading this evolution.
Yeah, and I'll be a tiny bit semantic in that answer, which is to say, we've got to be careful not to just start with what's the big brave thing we could do, because then you're in the stunt business. And when I talk about,
right, you get caught in that. Then that's
and
right.
It's a balance. And the thing with Opt Outside, well, and I'll just say two words about that briefly before I actually answer your question, because I think it's an important linkage. We started that conversation from a place of what are the holidays and how do we want to show up in the holidays? And the meeting was intended to be a standard. Are we going to do a buy one, get one free? Or are we going to do a,
right. I remember those meetings. Yep.
Yeah. And, are we going to have a great disruptive promotion? I was like 3 weeks into the business, and I just did what I was used to doing in an agency, which is create 3 creative territories, ask people to talk about the holidays, go on more of an emotional starting point than kind of the tactical, what's our promotion? And we had the conversation about the holidays that was, it's the best time of the year. It's my family. It's this. But then it very quickly got to it's the most stressful time of the year. Money's tight. My pants are tight because I'm eating too many cookies at parties. I love my family, but holy cow, my family. And we started to talk about Black Friday as like, it's all this pressure and all this stress, and it's bad for our people, and it's not great for this. And our chief merchant, Susan Viscon, who's been in the company 20 years, said, we could never do it, but what if we just didn't open our doors on Black Friday? And I said, well, why couldn't we do it? And we were kind of off to the races. And the reason why I tell that story is we didn't start saying, what's the thing we could do to get a lot of attention? We started with, what's the right thing to do? So, flash forward a year or two, and we had a conversation around gender equity in the outdoors. The industry and the space doesn't look as welcoming to women as it does to men. So we launched an initiative called Force of Nature that was about commitments to hiring practices, career pathing, understanding pay equity. Do we have the right classes? Do we have as many classes? Do we have as high quality performance gear for women as we do for men? Or do we have 15 backpacks for men and 1 pink backpack for women?
Right.
And we also did something that, we didn't tell the world we were doing, we just did. We took over our entire brand for a year with images of, stories of, movies of, podcasts of women. And the women became the face of our brand for a year, but we didn't announce it. And that was a, quote unquote, brave thing to do, in that your backlash is, men saying, why are you doing this? It was an easy thing to do because we're going to tell great stories about people who happen to be women. And in doing so, we're going to make a bigger point, not we're going to tell a bunch of stories about women and, and push away people who aren't women. And so we were willing to do something disruptive and different, or, and to use your word, brave, because we had a big reason behind it. And that's what we think about, is what is our purpose? What is the outcome that we want? What is the problem that we see? Public land's under threat from the current administration. What are we willing to do? What's the right thing to do to convene a conversation, to be a steward of the outdoors and a steward of our membership? So.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Ben, in your role, are you also getting into the nuts and bolts of the experience of being a member of the co-op?
Yeah. It's something we talk a lot about. And, I would say, for all the goodness of our membership, today it is far more transactional than I think we aspire for it to be. Your primary benefit is a dividend, right?
Yeah.
And
it's a lot more. It's a thing in the mail. It's a one-time thing versus
in the mail.
Yeah.
And I think for the people who have the deepest relationships with the co-op, it's just that. It's a relationship. It's about, shared sense of values, belief in a set of issues, understanding of the full sort of suite of benefits for membership. Today, though, I don't think our membership is exemplary of the best of the co-op in the way that we need it to be. And that's not because teams aren't working hard or being smart. It's because we haven't declared it as clearly as we need to. So that's a big focus for me, not only membership as an idea, but membership as a literal model to hang our business around. So
walk us through, if you could, and people love tactics as much as you can share or feel comfortable.
Sure.
What actions are you taking to move the organization, the leadership team you work with and the organization, to start to embed that?
So what we really did this year, I think better than we've done in years past, was to start our entire planning process from the point of view of the customer and understand what are we, and I'm going to mix empathetic terms with like business jargony terms and apologize for the collision.
We're okay with it.
What are our offerings, right? If our offerings are purely retail, okay, well, that's compelling, and we do a pretty good job of that. But it's
buying stuff. Buying stuff.
Yeah. Literally, if it's buying stuff, fine, but that's not the best space to demonstrate values or differentiation. And again, it turns out there are some pretty big companies who are pretty good at disrupting the way people buy stuff.
Yep.
I'll give you an example of something that our business has been about for a long time, but most people don't know it. We have a travel business that takes people around the world and gives them, life-changing experiences in incredible outdoor places. The people who know about that are insanely loyal to it, but not enough people know about it. So now you've got retail transaction. Now you've got experiences. We really made the decision. We're going to make experiences as big a part of what people know us for as retail is. Now, that's not going to happen overnight. It took 80 years to get to the retail place. It's not going to take 80 to get to experiences, but we have to be distortive. We also believe that the kind of content and storytelling space, the community space for us in the digital place, is a profound offering where we're solving big problems. We have a body of knowledge online called Expert Advice, which is free online information about all outdoor activity. It's the biggest repository of information online in the outdoor space. And last year we put almost 500,000 people through classes and workshops around the outdoors. So those three ideas, content and community, retail transaction, which is gear and apparel, and then experiences. We started from that place and said, what do those things mean to our existing customers? What do those things mean to the next generation of customers we need to capture? And how do we build a membership model that brings those things together in a way that has a benefit to you?
Mm-hmm.
And
so,
with that, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just sorry for interrupting. How did you, and how have you been gathering information about members and what's important to them? Because this is, we're breaking through with all kinds of things that are so much more interesting than what we've done before. So it'd be interesting to know what you're doing.
So we have this, one of the benefits of a membership model is it is incredibly important for me as a member when I buy something to get credit for having bought it. And the result of that is, from a pure transactional space, we have more data in terms of how you interact with us than anybody else, right? And like, companies would die for the match rate we have.
Well, because you have the behavioral information. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's exactly right. Now, that's great in understanding how you transact with us.
Right.
It's not as great in understanding other things. So what we've really started to work hard on is, how do we dimensionalize that? We have, I think, the best kind of retail employee base in the industry. And in 156 stores at this point, maybe 157, the people who wear those green vests, those inspired guides, have profound relationships with customers and literally are doing customer journey mapping and customer problem solving on like a one-to-one basis, but we're not capturing enough of it. So what we've tried to do more of is understand from that incredibly intelligent and impassioned group, tell us the stories, the conversations, the interactions you're having, and let's start to capture those. Then we're doing more kind of qualitative, ethnographic, psychographic research to understand that journey. And then we're really working hard, like every retailer in the world, to say, don't talk to me about channels, don't talk to me about levers, talk to me about an experience across an entire customer path. And in doing so, identify the opportunities, identify the gaps, but identify where we're solving problems and where we're not. So we've worked hard to kind of dimensionalize that. I'd add things like, social listening, because we have a very kind of vibrant conversation happening in the social space. We have, so anyway, as you start to put all those pieces together, you end up with more of a multi-dimensional picture of who that customer is.
That's right. The human.
And again, it
starts, not the buyer. You're getting to know the human. How are you doing that storytelling in the organization? One of the things that we know is, like you said, you don't want to talk about channels, but you've got lots of people impacting different parts of it. You are the uniter of that story. How are you doing that at REI?
I'm going to tell you, it's early days, and be a little bit just open about the fact that we've got a ways to go. I mean, this is an 80-year-old company that has cared about the customer from moment one, and probably better than anybody. But in terms of pure customer centricity, we haven't been this good. We've been more siloed in the past than we need to be. So, some of it's really deliberate choices, like in our strategy, building customer impact statements into that, literally building a customer perspective into every conversation we have, making customer at the center a mindset that we put on par with operational excellence and the importance of the culture. Deliberate conversation about that lens or that axis in a way that's different. And in doing so, as you've seen for sure in the organizations you've been a part of and led, that just starts to be a part of the conversation. And it goes from a foreign idea. People are saying now in meetings with no prompting all the time, well, what's the problem that I'm solving? Or what's the shared customer outcome here? And an idea as simple as shared customer outcome, customer lifetime value, as a good example of those type of, suddenly I'm no longer talking about retail or digital. I'm no longer talking about, a supply chain. I'm talking about our total relationship. And we're accelerating there. I think the place where we still have a ways to go is in the measurement and KPI space. We don't have as profound a measure for anything that relative to that we have for transaction. We have to advance those things in a big way.
And bringing it all together to understand the whole life and connecting it. And I call it honoring the asset. How many people did we bring in, volume and value?
Right.
And do we know in that same period how many are lapsed or lost volume and value? Because it's not how many parkas we sold, it's how many humans we engaged with or that
Exactly
are
right.
disengaging for some way. How are you?
That's exactly right.
Is there anything deliberate you're doing with this leadership team, which, you have such a wonderful situation there because everybody is purpose driven and purpose connected.
Right.
But are you finding there's things that is helping to make sure it's bred into the language? Is everybody going into the store? Are there other things you're doing and how you're uniting them with you as partners in this work?
I'll give you a good example of something we just did. And it's, and I'm not going to pretend for a second it was, I made it happen. It was again, as our culture is shifting here, we're recognizing these opportunities. We took something pretty simple. We took a leadership team down to a market and did a market visit in a completely different way than I've seen us do it in the past. We did a customer-based market visit versus a channel-based and so we were in a city looking in a more deliberate way through the eyes of the customer with our whole leadership team. How do we show up here? How does the competition show up here? What problems are they solving? What problems are we solving? And let me give you a really basic realization that makes me feel stupid to say out loud, but is profound, right? Turns out cities are made of neighborhoods, and simply looking at a map and saying a store here serves these areas. Well, if you've ever lived in the city, there's places you go and places you don't because the traffic is bad or it's tough to get to, or it's just a reminder that when you operate from a headquarters and look at places, you miss the asset, you miss the people, you miss the reality of being on the ground. It's also a recognition that your senior leadership team isn't going to travel to 25 or 30 cities and have all the realization. So we have to figure out what are the mechanisms that allow us to take the intelligence of the field and bring that into the decision. And that's where you got to change the model a little bit and say, what do we need to know that is known in the field that we don't? What questions do we need to ask that we're not asking? And then what levers of control do we need to get comfortable giving up at the center in order to enable customer relevancy and true customer relationship at the point of incidence, at the point of contact?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. It's refreshing for you to, really say where you are in the journey. And for everybody else out there, I think, we think of these great revered brands like REI and others, and often it's, to your point, a lot of really well done things. But now where customers have so many options and so many choices, you do need to become very deliberate at a set of things of making sure that this, starting with the customer's life, is sustainable in leadership and decision making.
Well, and I think you're dead right. And the thing I would say is we're a million times better at that in store today than we are digitally. You can walk into our store and feel a local presence, a relevancy and an understanding of what matters to you. And I think the journey we're on in digital, we have an incredibly successful digital channel as an e-commerce channel. We do really successful customer engagement in the digital space, in social and in email and other places. But we have a different experience in store than we have in digital. And it's not an intentional difference. It's just a difference. And we don't have all the specialness of the brand show up in as many ways as it could digitally. So again, not based on anything other than the business did what it was designed to do at the point it was designed to do it. And now we're recognizing the need to shift and change. So we got to play a lot of catch up there. And that involves things as mundane as technology debt and as profound and exciting as imagining a future state platform that operates differently. But the journey we're on is doing both of those things.
Yeah. And to make them connected to the goals and the things customers are trying to accomplish from a one company standpoint, right? Because we want it to be connected. Hey, we've got, I'm going to get to our last question in a minute. This has been so joyful, but I wanted to give you a chance to share with our folks out there something you're proud of that you've been able to hasten the company along from either from a customer standpoint, a member standpoint, or an employee standpoint? Because, we all know what's on the inside shows up on the outside. Is there anything as you're doing this work that you've found had to be or needed to be adjusted for either employees or members?
I'm going to give you two examples. The first is, we brought our entire headquarters staff together a few weeks ago to walk everybody through our strategy. It's not something we've done before, and we've got 1,700 people in a single room, and you're taking a half a day to really walk through it. And one of the things that made me really excited is the questions that came during the question and answer period just demonstrated how far ahead of the organization the individuals already were. One of the questions that stood out to me is somebody stood up and said, "Hey, I get a daily sales report every day in my email box. What am I going to get every day in the future to show me what the customer feels and what the value to the customer is?" And it was like, that's a pretty good question. And man, I wish I had a better answer. That was one of those moments like, hey, great question. If you have any ideas, my email is. No, but it was a great moment. And there were 3 or 4 questions like that. And every one of them showed us, customer at the center is a mindset I'm going to adopt as a person. And now I'm really eager and frankly, maybe even a little impatient for the organization to give me the tools to actually do it.
Well, and you've got to keep proving it back. You got to keep proving it back to the organization.
The other thing that I think was, really exciting and probably even more inside baseball was the planning process that we did this year, and even the budgeting process we did this year with customer at the center as the organizing principle went so much more smoothly and so much more gracefully than I've ever seen. And the reason why is there weren't debates and there weren't the gaps of like, my success is this and my success is this, and now we have to figure out how to translate them. The shared success was easy to see. And to link the two ideas, because of that, as we rolled out that strategy, the feedback that we got from the organization as we brought everybody together was, hell yes, let's go. Not the debating or the like, just this belief that we have the right path, we have the right North Star, we have the right destination. Our biggest concern is how fast can we get there? And those two things are exciting. They also feel different to me than maybe some of those experiences in the past where you had the organization kind of say, I think I get this, but what do you really mean? Or I think I get this, but I don't understand what to do next. So those, again, pretty tactical answers are indicative to me of what's beginning to feel like cultural change.
Yeah, no, and thank you for that. And I jumped in as you were finishing your last comment, but those are what people are yearning for, right? The proof points that this is, we're putting our mouth, our culture, our operations, our actions, in alignment with what we're saying we're going to do. So Ben, we're going to,
exactly right.
We're going to go to this last question. I call it the pay it forward question. And it's for others thinking about this work, doing this work, kind of thinking back to your experiences. What do you know now that you wish you knew then?
What do I know now that I wish I'd known then? So coming from the background that I came from, I was probably guilty of 2 things that I wish I wouldn't have been, and I wish I'd gotten to faster. The first was undervaluing data and undervaluing like true insights, because as a creative guy, it's great when it can't be measured and all you get to say is it feels right. And I probably used that for too many years. I wish I'd known really early on. I wish I'd had more of a background in understanding just the clarity that can come in looking at true measurable behaviors in the world. The other piece is, and again, I'm gonna blame my background, so I don't have to take any responsibility for it. I was definitely guilty of the bias that you can't ask the customer what the answer is, because a group of people can't tell you what the future looks like. The old not said by Henry Ford saw, right? If I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. What I've really come to realize is it's because we're asking the wrong question. You're absolutely not going to get a room full of people to tell you the answer. But if you ask them what's wrong, and if you ask them what isn't working,
and how they feel,
and you know how to listen, and how they feel, and if you know how to listen, you can find the answer. I mean, and the example I always use is, a room full of taxi passengers wasn't going to invent Uber. But if you listen to what they were telling you and how they felt about their relationship with that business, boy, you might have been able to invent something that then became the fastest growing company in American history. That bias, or almost that superiority relative to the customer, I wish earlier in my career I would have realized I was asking the wrong questions and probably listening in the wrong ways. So
great. Well, anything else you want to add for our folks listening out there?
No, I think they've probably heard more than enough of me talking. I just appreciate the chance to connect and talk about the co-op and the work we're doing.
Cool. Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. And thanks everybody out there for being with us and staying tuned. Please remember, go to customerbliss.com/podcast so that you can get this in your email box automatically. And thanks to you, to Ben. Thanks for being with us today.